Hello and welcome to I believe this is the sixth ASAB member hour in our series exploring the transformation of food and agriculture to circular systems. I'm Chuck Roth and I'm representing ASABE as I guess my co-host today. We'll get started here in a minute, but first a couple things. First thing, if you could keep your audio on mute for the entirety of the presentation, that would be really helpful. If you do have questions, you can place them in the chat, and those will be discussed during the question and answer segment at the end. And then this meeting will be recorded and will be available for later viewing online. And today I'm really excited. We've got with us today, we've got Ernie Shea, and Ernie is the president of Solutions from the Land, which is a nonprofit organization that brings agriculture thought leaders to the forefront of some of the conversations we've been having about the food system, the environment, and the evolution that we are moving through into the future. And I could keep going about Ernie and his background, but I think it's more important that we get Ernie. He's going to talk a little bit about why that transformation is important, and then lead us into a conversation with two individuals that have I like to say, their feet on the ground or their feet in the dirt of what that transformation means as it gets closer and into the production system that farmers are working with on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, Ernie, I'll turn it over to you for your couple slides and then to introduce the stars of the show.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Chuck, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending upon where you all are. First, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be part of this membership hour to share a little bit of information that we have been working on in close partnership with your society. And I see Darren is on, and my good friend Jim Jones. We've been kind of co-creating a movement, if you will, to help advance the concept of circular systems in agriculture and what that might mean to further enable farms to be more sustainable and deliver the solutions to all kinds of global goals. So a quick word about our organization, and then I'm going to turn this over to two of our farmer leaders who are going to talk really about their cutting edge work trying to experiment with circular systems. Solutions from the Land is a farmer-led not-for-profit. We've been around since 2004, I think. We didn't formally incorporate until 2014, but we've been exploring ways that agriculture can be revalued as a sector that not just produces commodities, which we obviously do, but a sector that simultaneously produces all kinds of additional goods and services that we've been calling ecosystem services. So the water that we filter and store, the carbon that's sequestered in the ground, the clean energy we generate, the ability to enhance biodiversity are all things that good sustainable farming systems provide as co-benefits. And that's what we're trying to focus the conversation around, moving from problems from agriculture to a better appreciation for all agriculture can do. And the circular approach to farming is part of our 21st century vision. If you could go to the next slide, Jasper. Earlier this year, we released a white paper that was the culmination of probably a year worth of thinking and work by a very diverse cross-section of farmer, rancher, forester leaders and our conservation partners around the country. And it outlines this new way forward, what we're calling a 21st century agricultural renaissance. And I'm not going to have time to get into it in any detail at all today, but the website link is there. And I'd urge you to, at your leisure, peruse it and take a look at the vision that we offer and the pathways for really re-energizing and supporting agriculture. And as I said, the circular approach to farming is a central part of our new vision. And we've been learning from you and partnering with ASABE as you've been working on circular systems. And that's why it really is not something that we own, but something we're learning as we go along and realizing there's all kinds of partners. And certainly the innovation and technology path is going to be critical to success. Next slide, Jasper. So as we've thinking about circular systems, we're really migrating from a linear approach to farming to this circular approach that has us designing systems that are integrated in nature, where we're producing and distributing goods and services, we're consuming, we're recycling, and it's a different approach. And the circular economy has been around for a number of years in other sectors, and it's just being discovered in agriculture today. And we're finding, even though it's maybe a little bit of a wonky term, circular systems, it really is at the heart of how farmers farm in a sustainable way. Next slide. And we've been experimenting with this at the state level. And one example we're going to talk about today is the future of Iowa agriculture, where a self-directed work group that we've been sponsoring and supporting in partnership with Iowa State University has been taking a hard look at the current state of agriculture in the state and where they want to go. And this word cloud kind of is a snapshot of where they see themselves today. And it's kind of a mixed bag, but it's still an overarching optimistic vision of the future of agriculture and way that they can continue to improve resilience, diversify, and deliver solutions to all of these systems. And the track we've been on in terms of our evolution over the last multiple decades has been more of a linear approach. And now we're thinking about a circular system as it relates to Iowa agriculture. And I've got one more slide, I think, for you before I turn it over to our farmers, who are going to be the heart of this hour today. And that's what we've been calling the circles of life. When you think about what happens on a working farm, this is a living landscape. It's a biological system that includes all types of loops. And the heart of them really go to the living organisms, including people, and how we can manage land to address multiple objectives simultaneously. So it's really about systems thinking, integrated land management, being most efficient as we can be, and being very focused on not just production of a commodity as an outcome, but thinking about the entire integrated system where we can produce energy, improve biodiversity, do a better job of managing water, while simultaneously producing, whether it's corn or beans or wheat or cotton or fresh fruit and vegetables. These are life systems, and so we call them circles of life. So that's my quick setup, and we're thrilled as a not-for-profit to have an opportunity to support farmer leadership teams across the country. And we have self-directed initiatives in place now in Iowa, Ohio, in Florida. We're about to begin work in Indiana. We're hoping to begin work in Colorado later this year. We've been on the Delmarva Peninsula in North Carolina. And every time we convene and meet with farmer leaders, we listen and we learn. And that's what's so exciting about this work, because the true entrepreneurs, the true innovators are the farmers that have to figure out how to make a living and deliver what society expects every day when they wake up. So that's my quick setup, and I want to reserve the bulk of our time here today to two of our farmer leaders, Kelly Blair and Brian Sievers from Iowa. They are both co-chairs of the Iowa Smart Agriculture Initiative, and they are not only farming, but they're leading a movement of their peers looking at the future of Iowa agriculture and thinking about circular systems. So I'm going to stop there. And Kelly and Brian, I'm not sure who was going to kick off and go first, but maybe I think we have one more slide of 3 farming systems. So yeah, so this comes at different scales, at an on-farm scale, at a watershed scale, at a national and global scale, conversations about circularity. And there's applications at each level. So Kelly, why don't I just turn it over to you? I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think your slide is next up in the slide deck, and you can talk about your farming operation and how you've been experimenting. So Kelly, over to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Ernie. Thank you guys for inviting us. We love to be part of the conversation. And I also like to hear about how things work for other people. So, and as Chuck said, my boots are on the ground, but they're also in manure as well as dirt. So I just want to let you all know that. So, like I said, my name is Kelly Blair, and I farm with my husband and two kids in north central Iowa. We're about half an hour south of Fort Dodge and about an hour to an hour and a half north of Des Moines. We are the fourth generation farming on our farm. We're a century farm, and we are pretty diversified as it goes with Iowa farmers. So we do grow corn and soybeans, but we also grow oats for food grade oats. We actually sell those to become oat milk, and we have alfalfa hay. We also custom feed pigs, as well as have a beef feedlot and a cow calf operation. In the last, well, since COVID, we also decided to start a direct sales beef business. And so when COVID hit, we decided that it was kind of scary not having auctions and processors open. So we decided to start that. So I think that diversification on our farm really helps us with that circular system. So this slide, there's not everything is on on this slide, but it gives you kind of an idea that there are a lot of different parts to our farm, but they all work together and are together in one way, shape, or form. So, just like engineers say you're going to build a tractor, there's a bunch of different parts to that tractor. There's the engine, the tires, the interior cab of it, windows, things like that. But at the end, your end goal is a tractor that someone can use and use efficiently. And so just like you as farmers, we have an end goal. So I'll just use corn as an example on our farm. When we think about a corn crop going in, we have a lot of different things we need to think about. We need to think about the economics. How much are inputs going to cost? Land prices, rent prices, fertilizer. Are we going to use manure from the farm? Do we need to buy commercial fertilizer? The ecosystem as well. We need to think about not just the ecosystem as far as the soil health, water quality, wildlife. We also need to think about the ecosystem for that corn. Our end goal is to create a good corn crop, a good yield. So we need to have a good environment, a good ecosystem for that to grow and do really well. So there's a lot of different things we need to put together at the end, but really what we need to know is a little bit about all of these operations. We need to be able to put it all together. So perspective is a big thing, because we need to know how it works within each system of our farm. So this fall, we had a little change due to input prices. I don't know if you guys have heard about anhydrous and nitrogen prices going up, but they've gone up quite a bit. And that provides, that puts a lot of risk on our farm. So on our farm, typically, all of our nitrogen is put on in the spring or the summer months of that crop. And so all of a sudden now we're hearing that nitrogen prices are going to be sky high. We don't even know we can't book anything for spring. We don't even know if we'll have any for spring. I mean, what do we do if we can't get it? And so we need to kind of make a decision, and we need to know the tools we have available, and we need to know what we know right now. So we know that nitrogen right now is high priced. We understand that, but it could be higher priced in the spring. We might not have it in the spring. So we need to make a decision. Somebody needs to make a decision on what do we do. And as far as what we decided is, okay, we know the risks. So we're going to put on nitrogen with anhydrous this fall. So instead of 100% going on next year, we're putting on 2/3 now. So we're not, all of our eggs aren't in one basket, but just like there's risk waiting, there's risk doing that. So we're looking at all of our options and all of our tools. We know that it was a dry year. We know that our soil temperatures are low enough that we really won't lose a lot of nitrogen over the winter months here. So then it comes into what what level of perfect do you want to go with? Because it's not going to be absolute perfect every time with environment and everything. So we need to make that decision. What tools do we have? We worked with the co-op. They have a bar that we can use, but the knives weren't quite what we wanted. And now that we're doing something different, we're going to try it a different way. So we're trying to make strips of with the anhydrous bar. So we bought some new knives and put on new knives, and we'll plant directly into that next spring. We have, that continual improvement, that's part of that process is we really need to go through that. So we know we're going to have wastes and errors. And that's all part of that circular system, is we're always learning and we're always working to make it better and to have that resiliency. That's, we talked about that as far as, conservation goes. We need to be resilient as farmers and for the land. And we need to be able to change along with everything that's changing on the farm level. So, that's my circular system at the farm ground. And just like we're a circular system at the ground, we fit into the bigger picture that Brian's kind of going to talk about a little bit too, but we're part of the bigger picture as well. So Brian, I'll send it on to you.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And I did want to thank Chuck and Jasper as well for the opportunity to speak to the ASABE today. I do have something in common. Our son graduated from Iowa State in 2005 with a degree in Ag and Biosystems Engineering. And he actually was our, when we built our anaerobic digester facility in 2013, 12 and 13, he actually was our project manager. He was in between jobs. He, after getting his degree in Ag and Biosystems Engineering, he went on to get his law degree, and he's actually currently works for Deere & Company as a patent attorney. So I have a great affinity for engineers and the work that they do, and without the professional input that engineers bring to the table, why we would not have been able to construct an anaerobic digester on our farm. If you want to advance to the next slide, Jasper. I talk a little bit about our system. And, the first thing I guess I want to just point out is every farming operation is unique and different. And that's one of the challenges as engineers and as operators we have. Kelly and AJ's farm in Webster County is unique and different from our farm in Eastern Iowa. We're in Scott County over close to the Mississippi River, just 20 minutes from Davenport and the Quad Cities and the home of Deere & Company. So we're unique as well. And if you were to look at our operation, you can probably see why. What we've done is my wife and I have been, she grew up on a farm in central Iowa. I met her at Iowa State as well. We're both Iowa State graduates. We started farming full-time in 1984 and have been growing our farming operation ever since. In 2009, we embarked on an opportunity to evaluate what we call a closed loop system, which is basically synonymous with the circular system that we talk about in today's lingo. And we wanted to expand our beef cattle operation. We were a feedlot that fed out 300 to 400 head a year in open feedlots. I never liked the way that we captured our manure, that there was always potential for runoff from that manure in settling basins. So we decided to build and construct cattle barns. But when we did that, we integrated the manure capture system into a way that we could utilize that manure, that fresh manure, on a 24-hour-a-day basis by pumping that into a pit, which then would pump directly into our anaerobic digesters. And so when you see the graphic here, it kind of illustrates what we've done. We basically take organic waste from our cattle manure, as well as a number of other waste streams. We get waste streams from a turkey processing plant here locally in West Liberty, Iowa. We get waste streams from a chick hatchery. We get waste streams from a potato processor in north central Illinois. We get waste streams from a pork processing plant in Davenport, Iowa. And so there's a number of other waste streams we bring into our farm every day. And every day we're pumping about 60,000 gallons a day of cattle manure, as well as these offsite waste streams into our anaerobic digesters. Those anaerobic digesters are each 970,000 gallons. And there we process that organic waste in an anaerobic environment, and then utilize the biogas that's created, as you see at the bottom of the slide, to generate electricity with a combined heat and power 1000 kW genset. That's a Caterpillar genset. So we sell that electricity to the grid. When we're running at full load, that's enough electricity for about 800 to 1,000 homes annually, because we run our generator 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's the one way in which we can generate revenue, is through the bringing in of offsite waste streams, where we receive tip fees from those vendors that bring us the waste streams, but also selling the electricity to the power company so they can resell it to the homes in the neighboring communities. But to me, the highest and best valued product coming out of those digesters is the digested material down in the lower right-hand corner. We call that digestate. And that's the rich organic material that's fully digested after anywhere from 2 to 4 week retention time in those digester tanks. And that material we stockpile or store in a lagoon. What we do is we separate the digestate into a liquid and solid fraction. The solids are a compost-like material. We call those biofibers. We stockpile that and we spread those on our fields, where we remove corn stover or wheat straw in the wintertime. And that's literally adding the digested material back to the fields, where we've removed them from the bales that we bring in, and then also the liquid we store and apply that either in the spring or fall to our fields, and that's our fertilizer. So we produce our own fertilizer, we produce our own heat for our digesters off our combined heat and power genset, and we produce electricity. So that biogas molecule in this circular or closed loop economy produces multiple forms of renewable energy, produces renewable thermal energy, produces renewable electricity, and it also produces very rich soil amendments that we're able to utilize on our 2,300 acres of crops. And actually we produce enough by bringing in these offsite waste streams for neighboring farmers. We actually sell the liquid and solids to some of our neighbors who utilize it on their farms. So as Kelly was talking about the high price of fertilizer, it hasn't impacted us because we essentially are producing our own fertilizer from those waste streams we capture from those 2,300 head of cattle that we feed, as well as the offsite waste streams we bring in and digest in our facility. The whole goal of this was to essentially value or utilize the natural resources that we're blessed with on our farms, the air, land, water, sun, and people in their highest and best use. And we think by going to this type of process, we're creating that closed loop process or circular process where we're growing the corn that gets fed to the cattle. The cattle obviously become a source of meat or protein for consumers. The waste stream comes into our digesters where we produce multiple forms of renewable energy, as well as the rich soil amendments, which go back into the fields to produce the corn, and the whole cycle starts over again. And by bringing in off-site waste streams, why we actually are adding to that closed loop economy. We really value working with our vendors, the turkey processing plant, the pork processing plant, to provide an outlet for them for their waste streams so that they become closed loop in their process. West Liberty Foods, one of the turkey processor, we bring in waste streams and blood from their processing facility in West Liberty, Iowa. They value as a corporate philosophy the fact that there's zero waste. They produce no waste outside of their plant. Everything is reused, and we're a big reason for that because we're taking a lot of their waste streams. They also send their waste streams to another digester facility at Amana Farms, just west of their facility. So they have some redundancy in their system as well. But it's a corporate philosophy of theirs, and they're actually a cooperatively owned facility to be zero waste. And that really kind of points to where we're headed and why we think that this type of process may work well across the state of Iowa and across the country. Anaerobic digesters are starting to essentially take off in terms of growth and development. There are approximately 45 new digester projects either under development, under construction, or newly constructed in California alone. There are 6 new digesters in Iowa that are under development or under construction, 5 up in Northwest Iowa, 1 in Central Iowa. Our membership, I happen to be a vice chair of the American Biogas Council. Our membership has grown from a little under 200 to over 300 in the last 12 months. So we've seen a great growth in our industry as a result of what's happening in this arena, because we are such a key part of the whole carbon neutral mindset that much of society, as well as business and industry, as well as the consumer sector, is focusing on right now. And what we do is we not only produce all these renewable forms of energy and rich soil amendments for our farms, but we actually produce carbon negative energy sources. What we're looking at doing down the road is, rather than generating electricity from our biogas, we're actually going to install an upgrade facility that upgrades the biogas from about 65% methane and 35% CO2 to essentially pure methane, or 99.8% methane, which is natural gas that will inject into a nearby pipeline and sell that natural gas to a customer literally in California who will use it as liquid transportation fuel. So we're looking at expanding our operation by the development of a renewable natural gas facility. It'll actually increase the value of that biogas that we produce tremendously. And that's one of the challenges we've faced, is by generating electricity, we essentially have had to compete against the rapidly expanding and growing solar and wind energy industries. And so wholesale costs of electricity have come down. So our price that we're receiving from our power company has dropped by about 25% since we commissioned in 2013. So it's made it very difficult for us to cash flow at 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour for our electricity. Really, the only way we manage to make a profit is from the tip fees that we get from the vendors who send us the co-feeds coming into our facility. But by going to renewable natural gas, we should tremendously improve the overall profitability of the digester facility and meet the needs of what California is demanding, and that's improved air quality. And the way they're achieving that is by looking at carbon negative or carbon neutral fuel sources to replace petroleum-based gasoline and diesel fuel in their fleets. So by focusing on the highest and best use of our natural resources, we think we've improved the sustainability of our operation. We've improved the resiliency of our operation. We've reduced the overall risk involved in our operation because we're not exposed to the high prices of nitrogen fertilizer, for example. And now by looking at renewable natural gas as a way to grow, why we think we're going to improve our overall profitability of the renewable energy sector of our operation as well. So, Kelly and I think we're blessed. I know the Webster County soil very, very well. That's rich soil. She's, in a great spot, some of the best land in the world over here by the Mississippi River. We've got pretty good soil as well. Maybe not quite as good as Kelly's, but it's awfully good. And we think we're improving the soil health as we go into the future by utilizing those waste streams here on our farm and taking them back to the land and creating that circular system. So I guess I'll stop there and maybe turn it back to Jasper or Chuck and see what questions the audience might have.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Kelly and Brian, for your kind of walk through your operations and what you've been doing. I would say at this point we don't have any questions that folks have put into the window, but I've got a few. The first one that came to mind, Kelly, as you were speaking, was you commented on the diversity in your operation, and the question that came to my mind is, for an operation that's a little bit more focused, say, in a certain sector of where you're diversified, do you have any examples where, and maybe this is more for Ernie as well, where farms have partnered together to create diversity in, let's say, kind of a cooperative environment, while still being able to specialize in a certain part of that larger system?
Brian, Ernie, do you have any specific examples?
Well, I think one that comes to my mind right away is Ray Gasser's operation. Ray is not on the call with us today, but he's the third co-chair. The triad leaders are Kelly, Brian, and Ray. And Ray has been working in this space, without calling it circular systems, for a generation. And he gives a circle of life talk. I heard him give it at COP25 in Madrid 2 years ago, where he talked about the symbiotic relationship he has with his neighbors. He doesn't have livestock, but he raises corn and beans. And he produces a feedstock that goes into a biodistillery, at least a good chunk of it does, that is used to produce a cleaner form of transportation fuels. The byproducts, the distiller's grains, are sold and fed into a cattle feeding operation or multiple cattle feeding operations. And the manure from those operations comes back to Ray's farm. So he talks about this circular neighborhood arrangement. And I don't know if it's a formally constructed arrangement or done on a handshake, but I think my guess is there's a lot more done on handshakes and mutual collaboration and support than there are formal agreements or cooperatives. But as we trend and evolve into a circular model of production, I think you'll see these types of relationships more clearly formalized because they're going to recognize the monetary value that they bring. And like everything else, you'll want to have rules of the road and guardrails. So Brian and Kelly, how about other examples that you've seen? Are they more informal or formal?
I would have to say there's multiple ways we partner with neighbors, employees, vendors. A lot of those are informal. Some of the formal relationships are with our vendors, the companies that bring us waste streams that we can take off their hands so they can do what they do best, and that might be process turkeys or grow turkeys. But we, by taking in those waste streams, we have excess digestate that we can then sell or provide back to our neighboring farmers. It's in my mind, and I think probably in theirs as well, it's a better form of fertilizer for their farms because it is organic in nature. You're actually adding organic matter to the soil when you're utilizing the digestate, as well as a little bit of sulfur that you wouldn't necessarily get unless you buy it as an and so by providing those resources, we really have developed, improved relationships, I think, with our neighbors from that. The other thing is we've got two gentlemen that have worked for us. One has been with us almost 25 years. Another one's been with us going on 10 years they farm just down the road, within a mile of our place. And, we were able to provide employment opportunities for them while they built their farming operation. So I think, we take a lot of value in that as well as getting neighbors that may want to continue to farm, maybe don't have an operation large enough to support their farming operation, but then can work for us. And we do that quite a bit as we focus on trying to help others around us with this operation, because that hub and spoke approach really does seem to work well with when you focus on utilizing the resources here locally. And I think Kelly can, probably come up with similar type of examples too. We for example, we roll up about 3,000 cornstalk bales a year. I've got a neighbor who does all of that work for us. We chop, ear corn. I've got another neighbor that runs a big silage chopper. He's going to, come in and do that for us. So we do work in a lot of different areas with neighbors and folks in the community who can help us run our operation and conversely provide a form of revenue to them as well.
And I think, as input prices and equipment prices continue to rise, majority of our land that we farm is cash rent, cash lease. And so it's not owned, it's not an asset to us. So, being able to think about sharing equipment, sharing resources, things like that. When you have a small profit margin, you sometimes start to think outside of the box, and you kind of have to. And it's just part of that resiliency, being able to think about things outside of the box rather than just saying, this is the way we do it, and that's the way we're going to stay.
Very good. Thank you. Couple of questions rolled in there. Brian and Kelly, you probably already reading them there. I think the first one was directed more at you, Brian, sharing on how your amendments are, how your organic amendments out of your system are applied onto the soil. If you could expand on that a little bit more, I think that'd be really interesting.
Sure. So the liquid effluent that we separate out of our digestate and store in a lagoon until we apply it to our fields, we knife that in just like any liquid hog or cattle manure you would inject. And I'm just going to give you an example. The what it's made of is at a 5,000 gallon per acre rate, which is not a high rate at all. When you look at some dairies are applying 20 and 25,000 gallons an acre of their dairy manure because of all the water in it. Ours is much more concentrated than that. But at 5,000 gallons an acre, we're applying about 250 pounds of nitrogen, about 150 pounds of phosphorus, and about 170 pounds of potassium. That's a pretty rich load for 225 to 250 bushel corn, but that's about what you need if you're going to achieve those kind of levels. And we would apply that every other year if we're in a corn soybean rotation. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of how valuable those the digestate is to us. The biofibers, the solids portion, really is essentially about the same. It might be a little bit lower in nitrogen because it doesn't have as much ammonia in it. And but as far as the P and K levels, are going to be pretty consistent with the liquid fraction. And then we stockpile that and we spread those on the acres where we take corn stalk bales off of. So we're replacing the nutrients that we've removed by removing the corn stover by using the biofibers. We just spread that with whether it be a manure spreader or slinger spreader of some type. So conventional farm equipment is utilized, for the application of all of our liquid as well as solids.
The next question came in there from Darren is kind of when you talk to other producers, how do you get started? Seems to be is that a common question? Maybe is the first one, and then what's your answer? What's your response?
My response would be to start small. We started cover crops probably over 15 years ago, and we still don't know everything about them. We're still learning about them, but we started with a 4-wheeler applying on a couple acres, and now we have everything ahead of soybeans. We drill in rye ahead of that, and so starting small is really how you learn. It's when you're thinking about how to do things and that the risks you have to take, you really won't find out until you start with a toe in, and then you can get bigger.
Yeah, and let's face it, what's the best learning experience? It's from your failures. I can go through a whole laundry list of failures in our, that we did in our digester facility, mostly from an operation standpoint, not from the engineering standpoint. So I'm not going to point fingers. It was mostly from an operation. Let's face it. I was in order to run a digester, you have to have some experience in chemistry, maybe mechanical as well as electrical. Well, I was an ag business major at Iowa State, so that was my level of expertise when it comes to those other areas. And I've learned by doing. Just like the old 4-H motto when it comes to the chemistry side of a digester. I've made lots of mistakes. I've got lots of stories to tell, but somehow we've survived. I'll give you the best advice that I was given before we started our facility. We're good friends with the people that own the I-80 truck stop. And of course, they've grown their business just unbelievably, and they're a huge success story. But she says, okay, just remember that when you start, it's going to take twice as long to get up and running. And she says, you probably want twice as much cash as what you think as well. So that when Kelly talks about starting small, that's the best way to start because you don't need as much cash, but just go ahead and double your estimate of what you need. If you're going to start with 100 acres of cover crops, whatever it's going to take, double the cash, and then you should have a good start there with cover crops. And she's exactly right. We've done, we've expanded. I started off with, I think 75 acres of cover crops. Now by next year, we'll be growing 1,100 acres of cover crops, because of what we think that it does for our soil. Plus, we also think there's going to be an opportunity to utilize the cover crops as an energy source for our digesters down the road.
Another thing is talking to people who have done it. If you have an idea, getting their experiences as well. Somebody's done it before, and for everything we've done on our farm, when we built our cattle barn, we went and saw so many different designs. Cover crops, the same thing. And anything we do, we either know an expert of some sort that we can talk to, or a farmer that has done it before. And those are really good experiences to help start.
Okay, the next question here is, should the scale of the operation be large to implement a circular economy? And I think we're kind of tailing into that. So if you just comment on size versus implementation.
I don't think size matters at all on circular systems, because even, you know, my farm scale, we might be smaller than some farms and we might be bigger than some farms. And so you're always going to have some type of system and they're all going to work together. You're going to have some social component to it, you know, whether you're using the local co-op, local grocery stores, things like that. You're always going to need to improve upon what you're doing. All of those things at whatever scale you're always going to have to think about.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Kelly on that. You know, let's face it, a sustainable farming operation used to be what our grandparents had, and that was a cow or two and maybe 15 or 20 layers, chickens, and you know, maybe a goat or two and a couple horses. You know, that was sustainable, and that was a very small operation. You know, and as agriculture evolved, I think we got away from that type of sustainability, and really that's what, you know, when Ernie talks about solutions from the land and what we're trying to do through the Iowa Smart Ag committee that we've created and are involved with. That's really what we're trying to do, is get back to a focus on sustainability and improving our resiliency as well. But obviously we have to do it at scale. You know, I just don't think there's enough revenue to support a, you know, a $40,000 or $50,000 cost of living for someone when you only have a couple cows and a dozen layers and 160 acres possibly. So you have to have scale and you have to have profit too. And that's why it's, you know, you have to focus on what can I do profitably given the size of investment that's necessary. You know, our type of the digester facility at our farm cost right around $7.5 million. That's a big chunk of change. Most farmers can't afford that. And that's why we really are looking at hub and spoke approaches, or now on the dairies that are implementing digesters in the Northwest and Central Iowa, they're actually having developers and outside investors own the digester facility. The manure is being provided to the digesters, but then the dairy farmer gets the digestate back for his fields, and there might be some cash exchange for those products, you know, going into the digester, coming out, and there might also be some additional money revenue to the dairy farmer for actually having the facility sited on the farm. So there's a whole variety of ways you can participate. You can participate as a minority shareholder in an LLC, you know, and have a very small ownership if that's all your capital requirements are able to achieve, or you can do it on a larger scale. And you know, and the way we did it, we basically, my wife and I says, we're going to do this. We're going to do it on our own. Well, we've gotten to that point now where both she and I are 62 years old. We have an opportunity to expand in this renewable natural gas arena, but we've also decided we're not going to take on any more debt. We want to partner with someone who has experience in the renewable natural gas project and upgrade technology. So we'll go out and solicit a partner. And that would be my other thought, is that if a farmer's really interested, has an integrated livestock operation, is talk to some potential partners to be involved to help, you know, make their goals a reality.
So one other point maybe I would offer on this question of scale is to remember that this conversation about transitioning to circular systems is not US centric. This is a global conversation. And farms vary across the world, and ranches from hectares and less to 750,000 acre managed grazing land operations that one of our board members is involved with in the headwaters of the Colorado. So there's opportunities to innovate and deploy systems at all different scales. And I think another key point I would add goes to why this is so important, I think, to you folks, the engineering world. We are going to be increasingly dependent on innovation and technology and more efficient systems to become more sustainable. So you play a critical role in helping design the tools and the practices, the systems that will be deployed at these different scales. When you look at what's happening right now in the world of new markets for ecosystem services and the technologies that are just flooding the marketplace to try to enable this to be a viable market. Just look at the artificial intelligence world and the monitoring and systems and the drones and the other ways that we are simultaneously at a very granular scale measuring all of these external contributions, these co-benefits that sustainable farms make. So, boy, we really applaud you, the engineering community, for providing leadership in this space. And we know we're not smart enough to figure this out on our own, because it really takes an entire collaborative of agricultural players to transform and evolve. So that'd be a thought I would have.
If I could just add or dovetail into that, and I know Kelly has worked a lot with government agencies as well as companies on their farm. We've had the same experience. We actually are doing a lot of work with Iowa State University right now through several faculty members who are doing research. And if you're doing something unique and new that looks like it has potential, those, whether they be development companies, engineering firms, universities, or other companies within the agricultural community, they're going to find you and see how they might fit within their business model. So there's plenty of ways to partner with others and to help grow that idea or concept. And especially now with carbon credits and the value that's being placed on carbon that you're sequestering in our soils. I mean, Indigo Ag and Soil and Water Outcomes Fund and a number of others, Syngenta, Cargill, the list goes on, companies that are coming into that arena saying, we want to work with farmers so that they can start to place a value on each molecule of carbon that we're able to capture and sequester, and let's find where that market is. So there's lots of opportunities to work with others in our industry.
Excellent, thank you. A few other questions have come in. So the first is if there's any opinion from you on how we can influence the electric company or utility company to raise their price for that off-farm electrical output. So yeah, I'll turn that over to you, Brian.
Well, I wished I could say I have an idea or an opinion, but unfortunately I don't. The law requires that the power company purchase our electricity at their avoided cost, and they get to run the math on what that is. When we started, the power purchase agreement we had was a 5-year agreement. The rate was 6.4 cents a kilowatt hour. And at the end of that 5 years, we requested and received a 2-year option, but we had to take a rate of 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour in years 6 and 7 of that agreement. So our rate dropped. I mean, that impacted us by about probably $7,000 to $8,000 a month dropped revenue off our as well as off our bottom line. Only because when we signed the agreement back in 2012, they knew that electricity rates were going down, and with all the influx of solar and wind electricity, why wholesale rates are very, very low. I just don't see how they're going to increase anytime soon, because we're still continuing to incentivize the construction of renewable energy facilities like solar farms and wind farms. I wish we had a better answer for that. The one way in which we can increase our revenue, however, is to demonstrate how we're improving carbon sequestration, improving soil health, and that's where things like Argonne's GREET model help us do that. And so we might get revenue from other sources. So when we sell our renewable natural gas into California, we'll actually produce low carbon fuel standard credits from the production of that natural gas that other industries that are emitting carbon have to purchase from us. So those are the kind of the external markets that we may generate additional revenue down the road. The renewable fuel standard is another way. That's the way ethanol and biodiesel plants generate additional revenue through the sale of their renewable energy liquid transportation fuels. We can do the same thing with renewable natural gas. In fact, renewable natural gas is the fastest growing sector of the renewable fuel standard right now. So that's another way we can produce credits for that federal market and receive this revenue from the sale of those credits to basically petroleum refineries and others around the country that have to purchase those credits.
Also directed at you, Brian, regulation laws, policies that restrict what off-farm materials you can accept for your digestion system. And then how do you account for those nutrients or what do you have to do to account for those nutrients regulations wise? Right.
So first of all, it's state by state. And in Iowa, we have to comply with a manure management plan based on our 2,300 head of cattle. And we have to have a land base that'll handle the manure from that. Well, what we're essentially doing is, taking that manure, running it through our digesters, and then pulling it out of the bottom as digestate. So we have the land base to comply. as far as the other materials that we're bringing in, we essentially have to, show that we have the land base, but there's really no regulation other than we can't bring in, the heavy metals, because obviously we don't want to put lead back or mercury back in our soils. And so we do test the inputs that we're bringing in from offsite to make sure we don't have the quaternary compounds or some of the heavy metals in our waste streams. But for the most part, we've never run into an example in our operation. I know that there have been in other cases an on-farm digester that ran into problems bringing in outside waste streams that did have those kinds of materials prevalent. But fortunately, we haven't. Our protocol requires that we test those materials coming in. Initially, we run them through a lab. We actually work with a lab in Belgium, Organic Waste Systems, that tests our materials, our substrates that we feed into our digesters, and then we routinely test the material that's in our digester tank as well to see if we're hitting our mark. As far as any other laws, policies, regulations, if you're on farm, we don't have to comply with, the industrial waste side of the regulatory scheme, if you will, in Iowa. We are treated as an on-farm digester, so the regulations are far fewer. But we do still have to account for, all the nutrients that are coming in and then going back out in our manure management plan.
Thank you. Next question came from Jim Jones, and let's see if I can. So the question is, if your experiences in becoming circular have been published or have been documented in more of a public way, and how can we, if not, how can we do that? Maybe is a good way to summarize that.
I could maybe I know there's a combined heat and power consortium that has published our facility as well as other similar facilities around the country. We work with the Midwest Combined Heat and Power Group out of Illinois that's made up of folks from University of Illinois, I think Iowa State, maybe Wisconsin, but basically some of the land grant universities that have good engineering programs. And so we've published our information and would be available through their websites. I know both Kelly and I have been written up in a number of periodicals. The only thing that I could point to, though, that in our particular operation that would be peer-reviewed type publications, Professor Mark Imba Wright from Iowa State, who's a professor in the ME department, did a life cycle analysis of our operation. And so that's published as a peer-reviewed document as well. And so that gives you a little bit better perspective of what we're doing, how the nutrients that we're essentially bringing into our operation from outside, as well as the beef cattle manure, are all integrated, and really the life cycle analysis of those nutrients and the energy produced. So that's another example of how we've had some of our information published through a peer-reviewed research project.
I don't think
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I don't think we've been in anything peer reviewed, but like Brian said, I mean, we do a lot, try to get involved, at the local, the state, and national level if we can too. But some of the things that we do are we work with the on-farm network through the Iowa Soybean Association. So replicated strip trials, that data is out there to show the things we're trying and how it affects yield. There's a lot of different ways that we can get into good publications. Brian didn't say we were in newspapers and for good things, so I just wanted to put that out there too. But I think we have a lot of farm field days to hopefully share our story, and that, to me, that's the best way. And because it's not going to be the same every single time we do it, but experiences are a really good way to share what we're doing.
And in the coming soon department, Lois Wright Morton, a board member of Solutions on the Land, and I teamed up on a paper that we wrote earlier this year. I think it was submitted in August or September to Jim. Help me, I can't remember Jim Jones. I thought it was to an ASABE journal, but it's out for peer review right now. And Lois is the lead on this. I'm helping her, but so I don't want to take any credit for this, but there is a paper coming from us.
If I could interject just a minute here. First of all, that's excellent, Ernie, and I've been really impressed by the other two presentations here today. And I think we need to get these stories out from the standpoint of the farming industries and the ways that farmers can and are already addressing these issues. And I haven't really run across literature, you know, that we're normally exposed to. Now, maybe some of us in ASABE have. So, but anyway, I really applaud the work that all of y'all are doing in Solutions from the Land. Excellent.
If I might just follow up on that question you're asking about, you know, what can ASABE do? Through our organization, the American Biogas Council, I chair an agricultural committee. Imagine that. That we're looking at ways to expand other types of manure, such as beef cattle manure and poultry manure, that will qualify for what's referred to as the Tier 1 pathway under California's low carbon fuel standard. Right now, dairy manure and swine manure are eligible, and that Tier 1 pathway provides the easiest path to get your biogas, renewable natural gas that you're producing into that California market at a level that's the best, the value, the highest value, and it generally produces the lowest carbon intensity scores, which is what you're after. So I think that there might be a way. We actually are reaching out to some university professors through Texas A&M Professor Offfarm, who's done a lot of work on syngas production and dry lot manure. And he actually, we've kind of really connected. And so, and I'm pretty sure he's an ASABE member. I thought I saw on his tagline. So I guess I would like to follow up with, you know, whether it be Chuck or Jim or, you know, those on the call to see how we might collaborate. Because in our organization, of the 300 plus members we now have, you know, I'm guessing that engineering firms are probably either number 1 or number 2 in terms of the type of classification of membership. So we've got a lot of engineering firms, and, you know, without that engineering, you can't build a digester. So I think that there's a tremendous opportunity potentially for some work together.
And on that note, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Alan Ryder, who serves on the Solutions from the Land Board of Directors. And Alan is a lifelong engineer, retired president of New Holland, North America. And he has been our pathway into your society. So we're very appreciative of the connections that have been made. And this is really what this is about. There's no one stakeholder that has all the answers to 21st century resilience and successful agriculture. So the more we can team up and collaborate in delivering high value solutions from the land, it's going to ensure agriculture's sustainability and viability for generations to come. So thank you for your support.
And I think, you know, that's one exciting thing about this is creating a circular system within all parts of ag. You know, just like on the farm, there's so many different parts of it. And on our farm, it's very exciting to work with other people and get ideas through them and talk things over. And these are the kind of relationships we want to try to get with the climate smart agriculture, is that we need to work with everybody. And in order for things to work and get better, we just need to try to improve.
All right, there's a few more questions. Let's see, I'm not sure I can stick around here. I can stick around for a few minutes. If others want to stay on, we can go ahead and finish answering those questions and then wrap up here. So a couple other questions. First, groundwater pollution issues. Maybe Brian, if you could talk real quick about how groundwater pollution has either influenced your experience with your digesters, or are there any issues that result from applying that to the soil? Oh, you might be on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
Excellent question, because, you know, we place a very high value on our water as a resource, and if a couple of things to consider. Number one, by injecting the liquid effluent into the ground, you know, we're preventing the surface runoff of that liquid effluent into surface water. So we think we're actually, you know, eliminating the potential for surface water contamination by injecting. The injection of 5,000 gallons, let's say per acre, that's done, in compliance with a DNR, Iowa Department of Natural Resources manure management plan, which takes into account that you can't contaminate groundwater, with application rates of your manure sources, if you will. And so we think we're, doing the right thing for our soil by injecting the liquid effluent into the ground. We do think we're doing the right thing for our water quality by injecting it and keeping it off the top. And that's when you lose nutrients into surface waters, is through sedimentation that, manages to find its way into a creek or stream. So by incorporating no-till, high residue farming practices, with injecting your nutrients below surface, we think we're doing an awful lot to prevent potential runoff from our liquid effluent or any soil amendment that we might be adding to the soil. So good question though.
Another question for you, Brian, related to the digester. Do you have any experience or any thoughts on how to pull in more consumer food or waste into your biodigester input?
We've actually, perfect example, we met about 4 years ago, I believe, with the Hy-Vee store managers in the Quad Cities region. There were 14 of them at a table, and they wanted to take all their food waste and send it to an outlet. And we essentially competed for that food waste with a compost facility, which was in southeast Iowa, and then a beef cattle feedlot, which was in Illinois. And we were going to need a tip fee, a nominal tip fee. I think we were going to charge around $6 or $8 a ton, which isn't very much, because we weren't quite sure what we were going to get into with the processing of that food waste. I mean, when they dump a truckload of watermelons on my stockpile pad, we're going to have to grind those up and process those before we pump them into a digester. And so I knew I potentially was going to have to add some equipment and technology to that process, but literally lost out to the feedlot because they were going to take it for free, if you will, because it is, it's sugar, right? And most of the food waste that comes out of a grocery store. But yeah, we've looked at a number of potential sources of food waste. Most of the food waste we're essentially taking in currently is industrial food waste rather than more on the retail side of things. But we're certainly available and can take, retail food waste, whether it be from restaurants, institutional food suppliers, or grocery stores. It's an excellent opportunity if the situation is right.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Just really want to say thank you to Ernie, Brian, Kelly, for your participation today. This has been really awesome, informative for me. Actually, a side note, I learned today that Brian, my dad's turkeys go to West Liberty Foods, and so they end up in your digester.
That's right.
Or at least parts of it, which is pretty crazy, especially when we started talking about how that circularity of system circularity is actually much larger, I think, than what we even realize when we have these conversations, how large it can really be. So they're coming from central Illinois all the way over into Iowa and eventually onto your soil. So that's really interesting. So
be sure to thank your dad for that. Thank you.
I will let him know. I haven't sent the text message yet, but it's going to be coming in the next hour or so here. So, but yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to ASAB staff, especially Jasper, that made ASAB member hours a reality. As I mentioned at the opening, this is the 6th of what has ended up being I think it's going to be a 7-part series on circular systems. So we've got another one coming up. I think I've got it on my right here. Allison Thompson from Field to Market is going to be coming to talk on December 9th. So that's a week from today at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So an hour